everyone, and welcome to week 7 of Big Balls Fantasy Football. I am your host, Jenilee Boric. I've been playing fantasy for quite a while now. I'm also a huge Chicago Bears fan. And I know you're wondering, where is Greg the Beast this week? Well, he is on his birthday vacation, so I'm holding down the fort here. But he does have his picks for you, so don't worry. You will get his week 7 picks. Let me go right into it. The Bears-Detroit game, I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but I am just going to say a little bit. What a game. I do say that the Bears played their hearts out. I think the injuries on defense is really starting to get to us, and I think it's starting to be a problem for sure. We have a lot of injuries on that defensive side. On the offensive side, we've gotten a few guys back, which is good. But they fought. Detroit finally looked like Detroit. They finally looked like they knew what they were doing from last season, let's say. And it's just been a while since they've looked like that. So there were a ton of bad calls in that game on both sides of the ball. I'm not just going to say that the refs were calling things bad against the Bears, because there were some very bad calls against the Bears. If you saw the Golden Tate touchdown that was actually an interception, that was a huge one for the Bears. But there were also some bad calls on the Lions side. The refs in that game were absolutely terrible, terrible. The NFL needs to figure this out. They need to improve things. It's just not good to have a game that messy by the referees and things that really change the game, because it's a game that went into overtime. And here we are with the Bears having an overtime loss by 3 points, when really Golden Tate's touchdown should not have been a touchdown. So, not going to keep talking about it, but the NFL needs to clear things up with a lot of the rules, especially the catch rule. I know that's something everyone talks about, but none of us really know what a catch is. So, the NFL needs to definitely clear that up. I'm just going to go through a couple fantasy stats for the game, because we are a fantasy football show. So Cutler had an okay day, nothing amazing. He did pass for 353 yards, which was great, but only 1 touchdown and 1 interception. There's that Cutler interception. So he didn't get you a ton of fantasy points there. Jeffrey, his first week back, he went off. He had 8 receptions for 147 yards and a touchdown. So I hope that you put him in your lineup for his first week back. Martellus Bennett did okay. He had 6 catches for 59 yards, nothing too amazing, didn't get in the end zone. And Forte had a pretty good day. He had 69 yards on the ground, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion for you, along with a few receptions. So Forte did what he normally does. Now, on the Lions side, fantasy-wise, Stafford finally figured it out. Where has he been? They were a desperate team needing a win. He passed for 405 yards, 4 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. So this was by far Stafford's best game of the season. Megatron was there getting a lot of those catches, and he went 6 receptions for 166 yards and a touchdown. And Golden Tate had 6 receptions for 40 yards and that touchdown. That's where he got you those points if you had Tate in. Their running backs didn't really do a whole lot. Amir Abdullah fumbled yet again, and Theo Riddick did a little bit in the passing game, but nothing too major. Another thing I just want to say about the Bears real fast is I was a little disappointed how conservative they were being in overtime. I understand that there's always a fear that Jay Cutler is going to throw a pick, and overtime is the worst time to do it. But you have to pick your poison a little bit. You have to say, hey, are we afraid of Cutler throwing a pick or something, a turnover, something bad happening? Or are we going to play it so conservative that we can't even get in field goal range to get a field goal, and we're giving the ball back to the Lions? And, the Lions took a risk. Stafford had a deep pass to Megatron down the sideline in overtime, and ultimately that risky play maybe is what made them be able to win the game. So sometimes you really have to weigh things out. I don't like how conservative the Bears were in that overtime. I would really like them to do things a little bit differently if they're in that situation again. But hey, it's a rebuilding year for the Bears. We know this. No shocker. Only 2 wins on the season so far, so this is just how it's going. Bears are on a bye this week, so they at least get a week to rest up, try to get healthy, and get back on the field for the Vikings in week 8. So I'm going to get into my picks very quickly, but I want to remind you guys to go ahead and download our free app. It's free, so there's no excuse for you not to download it. We have awesome lineup questions. You can send us your lineup questions for the week. We get your answers to you as fast as we possibly can. We have awesome blogs on there. You can, of course, watch our show with our picks on there every single week. And we link you to all of our social media as well on there. So go check us out. Our social media, BigBallsFantasyFootball.com is our website. You can go to our Facebook page, Facebook.com/BigBallsFantasyFootball. Tweet us at BigBallsFBall, our Instagram, all of it. You can follow us all over social media, but it's all on the app right for you. So if you just go download that app, you don't even have to worry about the other stuff, and you can link to us easily. So that's the intro for this week, talking a little bit of Bears, Lions, and I'm going to go ahead and move it on to my picks right when we get back.
I need a real man. Have you seen him?
Welcome to week 7 of my Real Men picks. I, of course, have my 2 go hard and 2 go soft picks for you this week. I have to say, in all my leagues, I'm doing pretty good. I'm in 3 leagues this year, and I'm 4-2 in all of them, so I'm okay with that. But the bye weeks have been a little bit rough, so I'm going to try to give you some picks to help you get through these bye weeks. I know this week we have a lot of people out. We have good quarterbacks out. We have good receivers on a bye. So this week is especially going to be a little bit tough. So going into my first go hard pick, I'm giving you a quarterback that you can probably get on the waiver wire if someone hasn't scooped him up, but that is quarterback Blake Bortles of Jacksonville. Yes, I'm giving you a Jacksonville quarterback. But hey, if you look at his numbers are not bad. Why I like his matchup is he's going against Buffalo this week. In the last 3 weeks, he has thrown for 8 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I know you're saying, well, the 8 touchdowns is great, but those 4 picks, what's going on there? Yeah, he is going to throw picks because he's not the most accurate quarterback, but you also have to consider that 3 of those interceptions came in last week's game alone. So that was a really bad game with him interception-wise. He still had 3 touchdowns, though. But the touchdowns are going to get you quite a few points, so that's what I'm looking at for this week. Also, the Bills' defense has given up 13 passing touchdowns this season, which is the 3rd most in the league. So Bortles is hooking up with his 2 Allens, Allen Robertson and Allen Hurns, and he's getting both of those guys in the end zone quite often this season, and the Bills' defense just gives up a lot of touchdowns. So that is something that I'm looking for him to be having a good time getting his receivers in the end zone. And Bortles is averaging 272 passing yards per game this season, and the Bills' defense is giving up an average of 269 passing yards per game. So it looks like Bortles should at least be going for about 270 yards. Maybe he'll hike over that 300-yard mark. But I see him having another 2 to 3 touchdown week this week. Go ahead, pick him up if you need him. I picked him up in a league and get him in your lineup for week 7. Now, my second go hard this week is John Brown of the Arizona Cardinals. And why I like this kid is he is going against Baltimore's defense. First of all, he has the 2nd most targets on the team. We know Larry Fitzgerald is out there doing his thing. He looks like the old Fitz again this year. But Brown has the 2nd most targets on the team, and he's catching 73% of what's thrown to him. I like to look at that percentage every once in a while because just because a receiver is getting a lot of targets doesn't mean that they're catching a lot of the balls thrown to them. He is catching a lot of what's thrown to him. In the last 4 weeks, he's had more than 60 yards per game. That's a solid number. Now, I know his touchdown number is a little iffy. He only has 2 touchdowns on the season so far. And if you're putting him in your lineup, you're saying, hey, I need this kid to get in the end zone. The yards are great, but the touchdowns is what gets us points in fantasy. But the Ravens have given up 9 of their 11 passing touchdowns to wide receivers. So most of the touchdowns being thrown against the Ravens are going to wide receivers. I see this being a game where the Ravens defense looks at it like, hey, we need to stop Arizona's best weapon, which is Larry Fitzgerald. which might leave John Brown quite open. He might be getting some one-on-one matchups if Fitzgerald is double covered, and that's going to allow him definitely to get more yards and hopefully in the end zone for his third and fourth touchdown of the season. And 4 receivers have over 100 yards against Baltimore. That's not so good considering that we've only had 6 weeks of football. And Bolden and Crabtree are 2 of the receivers that went for over 100 yards against them. They are by no means the most talented wide receivers out there, but each of them had over 100 yards against this Baltimore defense. So I think John Brown is the guy that can get it done for Arizona this week. It's a similar situation to what happened. I told you to play A.J. Green last week, and A.J. Green had a pretty bad week, but Marvin Jones had a phenomenal week. So again, sometimes these defenses are trying to pick their poison, stop the number 1 guy, but then it leaves the number 2 or number 3 guy, it leaves them open to be able to do more. And I think that's the situation that's going to happen for Arizona this week. Now let me move it on to my go softs. These are the guys that, if I were you, I wouldn't expect a lot of points from this week. My first go soft pick for this week is quarterback Sam Bradford, and he is going against the Panthers defense. Now, I know a lot of you probably are not playing him unless you absolutely have to, but if you're in a deep league, you might have had to pick him up at some point. Maybe you're having to play him because of bye weeks, but this is not the week you're going to want to play this guy. He has 9 touchdowns and 9 interceptions on the season this far. That's horrible. I always talk about you want at least a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. That isn't even close. He's throwing just as many interceptions as he is touchdowns, and I definitely don't like when a quarterback is struggling like that. Now, the Panthers defense is, again, who he's going up against, and they have 8 interceptions on the season, which is tied for 3rd best in the league. So they have the 3rd most interceptions in the league this far, and they have 13 sacks. So they're not getting as many sacks as some teams, but they're still putting the pressure on the quarterback. This is a tough road game for Philly. The Panthers have only given up 5 passing touchdowns total this season, so they're keeping those wide receivers out of the end zone, and that's just something that Bradford's having some problems with. He's having problems getting his wide receivers in the end zone, throwing touchdowns. He's throwing interceptions. The Panthers are getting a lot of interceptions, so again, this matchup doesn't look good. And the Panthers are only giving up 18.8 points per game. They are really holding their opponents and not letting them score a whole lot. So again, with this being a road matchup for Philly and the Panthers aren't a defense that give up a lot of points, I just don't see this being high scoring. We've seen how this Eagles offense is struggling. We just saw it on Monday Night Football against the Giants. Their offense is having a lot of problems this season, and so far they haven't figured it out. And I just think this is going to be another tough week for them against this Carolina Panther defense. Let me move it on to my second go soft. My second go soft is Browns running back Isaiah Crowell, and he is going against the Rams defense. Now, why I don't like him is not only because of the defense, but because of what's going on over there in Cleveland Brown land. Now, I know that he's another guy. You're probably only playing him in deep leagues, or maybe you're forced to put him in your flex position some weeks. If you're in a smaller league, he's a guy that's probably out there on the waiver wire. But if you've been forced to play him or he is on your bench, keep him on your bench this week, because the Browns have been using running back by committee, which is fantasy poison. They are using Duke Johnson a lot in the passing game, and they are also throwing in Robert Turbin as well. So this is a bad situation for Crowell to be in. He's not the lead back. He's the lead back, but not really, because they're rotating those 3 backs in. And he's only averaging 3.7 yards per carry this season. That's another reason why they're throwing other running backs in there. And he only has 2 total touchdowns on the season, 1 rushing touchdown and 1 receiving touchdown. We're going into week 7, people. That is terrible. If he's not getting in the end zone, he's not getting you those fantasy points. And the Rams defense, they are coming off of their bye week. And another thing I've noticed with them is the last couple weeks before their bye week, their run defense improved. The first 3 weeks of the season, they were allowing 112 rushing yards per game. The last 2 weeks of the season, they only allowed 74 rushing yards per game. So they're figuring it out a little bit, and they're stopping the run a lot better. And I think them coming off of their bye, this is when the team is more healthy, a little more energized. This is not going to be a week to mess with that Rams defense. And it's a road game for the Browns as well, so they're going to be over there in a hostile environment against the Rams, and I just definitely don't like the matchup. The Rams also get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and they are going to know that they're going to be able to get pressure on Josh McCown. They're going to be able to throw him off on his throws, and so their mentality going into this game should be to focus on stopping the run because they're not going to have a hard time getting to Josh McCown. So this is a bad matchup for the Browns as a whole. This is definitely a bad matchup for Crowell. Do not get him in your lineup this week in week 7. I'm going to shoot it over to Greg because even though he's on vacation, he does have his week 7 picks for all of you. So now it's time to get his week 7 beasting out picks, even though he gets to be on a cruise and on vacation. Shooting it over to Greg.
Hey everybody, welcome to week 7 of the NFL. It's Greg the Beast here with your 4 beasting out picks this week. You're wondering, hey Greg, what do you got that crazy island shirt on? Well, I'm going on a cruise to Mexico. I'm wearing this on the cruise, and damn it, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't leaving you hanging. So while I'm getting a drink at the bar, you're going to be watching this and you're going to be winning your league in week 7. So let's get down to it as we always do. We give you 2 go hards and 2 go softs. My first go hard this week is Cam Newton, quarterback on the Panthers. He has been running like a madman. Why? Because he has no receivers to pass to. And basically Ron Rivera is just saying, run, 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 Cam, run. And he is on pace for 174 rushes this season. That's insane. That, if he does that, would be 40 more rushes than he did back in his insane dream 2012 fantasy season. Got a great matchup this week up against the Eagles, who have been giving up at least 40 fantasy points to quarterbacks every week. The only week they didn't do it was when Romo went out. So then it got split between Romo and Brandon Weeden. But otherwise, to each quarterback, they've given up 40 fantasy points. You're going to get at least 40, probably in the 50s with those rushes for Cam Newton this week. Excellent matchup, dream matchup. You got to get him in there. There's no way you can't. My second go hard for you this week is AP over there on the Vikings. He has, speaking of rushing, has been going out of his mind too. Week 1, he was a little shaky. He had to get that rust off. He was out for an entire season. Give him a break, all right? He went nutsoid up against the Lions D. He rushed for 134 yards against the Lions, and usually when there's that interdivision rivalry, it's fantasy poison, as I like to call it. Not in this case. Detroit's defense has just sucked against the pass and has also sucked against the rush. And once again, in week 7, AP is up against Detroit. You got to get him in there. You got to get him rushing. He is going to ball out for you this week. So my first go soft for you is over there on the Patriots, Julian Edelman, and I know what you're saying. Hey, he's a must play every week. If you got to play him this week, play him, but you're not going to get double-digit fantasy points out of him. Unfortunately, the Patriots are playing the Jets, and I know the Patriots and Tom Brady have been losing their mind, but this is a tough Jets defense. They've given up the 7th fewest points to wide receivers, and you also are dealing with a really tough pass rush on the Jets. I see this being like a 16-14 game. I don't see it going too well. So Julian Edelman is not a great pick for you in week 7. My final pick for you is T.Y. Hilton over there on the Colts. He has, of course, been splitting targets with Andre Johnson, who they brought in. And also you're dealing with the fact that Andrew Luck hasn't been completely healthy, and also the offensive line has just sucked. So Andrew Luck has been running for his life over there on the Colts. That means T.Y. Hilton hasn't been getting you fantasy points. He hasn't had one 100-yard game this season. That's pathetic. Matchup this week up against the Saints, who haven't given up 100 yards to one receiver. So not looking good in this week's matchup. We saw the Saints go insane and pass rush the hell out of Matt Ryan and bring down the Falcons on Thursday Night Football. It was pretty damn brutal. The defensive coordinator over there on the Saints has been really amping it up, and they've really been working hard on that secondary. They've been knocking down passes. I just don't like it. And T.Y. Hilton just has been underperforming, period. So if I were you, I know this is a horrible thing to say, bench T.Y. Hilton this week. So those are my picks for week 7, and bon voyage to me, and I'll see you in week 8.